Okay. So everybody is having fun, everybody learning. I've been in this field for forever, and every time I talk to somebody, I learn something new. So I hope you're having the same kind of experience. This is a brand new field. There's a lot to learn, a lot of stuff that we think we know that we need to disabuse ourselves of, and a lot of interesting conversations to be had or thoughts to explore, which is great. So today, I want to talk about something that is interesting to me at this point in my thinking about how to design great experiences, right? And designing is usually, if you're a good designer, you have a philosophy of design, right? What is the bottom line driving set of tenets that that inform the way you proceed in terms of designing something, right? So for me, it's creating a beautiful experience, aesthetics, so that hopefully I disabuse you of the notion that aesthetics is sort of sprinkles on top of something or icing on the cake. It is, aesthetics is, I think, the essence of at least within the way I approach things, is the essence of what drives me to build something. Something aesthetic is something that is attractive, something that you want to use, something that makes you feel good when you use it, and goes to the heart of what makes a product usable, right? Anyway, so let me start with something very basic here, right? Oh, technology, right? How do I make the slide? Okay. Let me go back. So somebody knows how to use this thing? Up and down, right? All right. Okay. I want this slide here. So this slide is actually a picture that I took from my phone about 4 weeks ago. And I'm going to be using this slide from now on whenever I talk about design, because design is tricky. So this is within a Google Play. I downloaded an app, right? And started using it, and then this thing comes up and asks me a question: does this app contain deceptive ads? Right? It's a very simple question. It's yes or no. But if you see, the no is down, and the yes is up. Right? Usually, no means it's not good, and yes means it's good, right? So no, in this case, is sort of a double negative, right? Deceptive ads. So the no should have been a thumbs up, and the yes should have been a thumbs down. And that just caught me like, wow, even something as simple as this, one can be tripped up. And so you have to think through everything when you design something, right? You have to think about the message and the way you're rendering it. And so, I mean, as simple as GUI is, and we have been doing GUI for how many years now? Decades, right? And still get tripped up. So that's just a sort of a caution to all of us that even the simplest things that we design are tricky. Okay, so now let me see how I can go to the next slide. Okay. All right. Okay. So let me ask you guys, which one of these three would you want to buy as a juicer, assuming that they're all at the same price, modular price, right? So all of them are functional. All of them look pretty, right? But one of them, at least for me, stands out, which is the one on the right. It stands out as it has character. It's interesting. It's edgy. It's like, it's almost like it has a life of its own, right? It has like a cap, it has feet, and so on. Oh, I'm sorry. You can't hear me? I'm sorry. I'm going to stay here. So they're all functional, but the one on the right feels like it's more beautiful. The ones on the left seem to be trying hard to look nice, colors and all that. But the one on the right is just, it is what it is, right? And yet, it's very attractive, right? So that picture came from a book. Let me go back. This is tricky. Okay, this book here. Sorry. Okay. This book here called Emotional Design. If you haven't gotten this book or have not read this book, you should get it. It's a great book. It just tells you about the basic fact that emotion is not, again, icing on the cake. It is something very important for us to survive as a species, right? Your emotion gives you a way to react very quickly to something. You like it, you don't like it, right? You don't have to think through whether you should do something or not. You act a lot more quickly when you have an emotional reaction to something, right? So why should we care about aesthetics, right? Because as I was saying, products that are beautiful, we want to use them. How many times you've had something that is just beautiful, but it's not as functional as it needs to be, and yet you still want to use it, right? Just because the experience of using something beautiful is inherently something that you want to do. If a product is, like the iPhone, for example, when it came out compared to BlackBerry, it was a beautiful product. It had a nice touch to it. It had colors. It had a nice screen. It was just slick, and so people loved it. They loved their iPhone. I don't know if there was as much love. I think there was, but not as much love to the BlackBerry. The BlackBerry is very functional, and the iPhone is both functional and aesthetic. You use it more often. You're more patient using it. This is very important for learning, right? If you want somebody to learn how to use your product, try to make it aesthetically pleasing, because they need time to learn the product. They show it off, right? Because they want to be associated with it. They show off the product. Okay. And so we all know what does that mean? We all know what a beautiful product looks like when it's visual, right? I think we all agree more or less that these are beautiful products. The question then is, what does non-visual beauty mean, right? I think we all know, I think we all can say that a piece of music is beautiful, like a Chopin or Mozart, right? You do apply the word beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of music, right? Sounds of nature, right, are beautiful. Sounds of birds, sounds of river, sounds of the rainforest. There's something about them that when you apply the word beautiful, it applies. Sounds of activities that we love, like I love baseball. I love hearing the sound of a baseball game, right? Or if you are a skier and you love winter sports, you love to hear the sound of people skiing, right? Imagery, besides the sounds, the language itself, imagery of the language. When somebody says something that is evocative, that creates an image, a vivid image. In terms of phrases, also wisdom, right? When you hear somebody saying something wise. I have an audio here I wanted to play, but I don't want to play adventure with technology. Anyway, so I think we all agree, at least in terms of sounds, we have a sense that something is beautiful and we can recognize it. Now, what is interesting, so there's acoustic and linguistic, those are the sound and the phrasings. But what I want to talk about briefly, because I still have a long way to go to do a deep dive in my thinking, is what does conversational beauty mean? When you have a conversation with somebody, what does it mean that you had a beautiful conversation or a great conversation or that you enjoyed the conversation, right? So I think we do say that when we talk to somebody and the conversation is flowing, that I have enjoyed our conversation. And sometimes we mean it, right? That the conversation was meaningful, that it flowed, right? It was engaging, it was effortless. You know, when you are talking to somebody and there are awkward moments and you don't know what to say and so on, right? That's not a beautiful experience. But in terms of a conversation that flows, you can say that conversation was an enjoyable conversation, beautiful conversation. Usually conversations that are enjoyable are energizing. Like when you finish the conversation, you want to do something or you want to act on what you feel more alive, more energized. They usually have humor, right? Doesn't have to be hilarious humor, but there is some humor always in a good conversation. And usually good conversations, they end gracefully, right? And when you're trying to end the conversation, and that's the beauty, is that we're all conversationalists, meaning we're all more or less competent people when it comes to talking. I think we all agree that we make an effort to end the conversation in a graceful way, right? It's not like, hey, okay, I'm done talking to you, I'm gonna talk to somebody else, right? You try to end it gracefully, right? So again, that's the first level of thinking on my end. As I was saying before, there's a lot of thinking to be done. But if we think about how do we make a conversation beautiful, or how do we make somebody enjoy a conversation with a smart speaker, an Alexa skill or Google Action and so on, is that construct, is that way of approaching things useful? And I'm finding it more and more useful when I'm thinking about designing an experience, right? So, so let me make some basic observations before I sort of enumerate some of my thinking about what to do in the context of designing Alexa skills and Google Actions and so on. So unlike the visual and audio, right, meaning you're listening to a piece of music or you're looking at, say, a piece of art or at the car, right, the subject-object, there's a distinction, right? So there is there and you're here and you're receiving the experience. Of course, all of your background and all that will help you be more appreciative or less appreciative of the object, but it's sort of, you know, you're here and the object is there and it's a one-way. But conversations, when you're talking to somebody or talking to a smart speaker, right? That conversation didn't have anything before it started, right? So it didn't exist. And now it exists, and now making it beautiful is a collaborative process, right? So you could sabotage, for example, an Alexa skill that was designed nicely if you want to, right? You could just say things that you know it won't understand. But the second observation is, you know, if you go into a conversation willingly, right? You are not forced, let's say, as opposed to an interrogation, right? If you engage somebody willingly into a conversation, usually you are vested in cooperating. You're vested in making the conversation flow. You're vested in not tripping your conversational partner. In this case, the Alexa skill or the Google Action, right? And that's a cooperative principle in this philosopher of language, Paul Grice, and he has a bunch of principles, and one of them is when you engage somebody in a conversation, you are observing a set of principles and maxims, and the main principle is the cooperative principle, that you are working with your partner to make the conversation flow. And the last observation is, this is not, it may seem trivial and to you, but and for those of us who have been working in this field of voice for a long time, before smart speakers came into being, you are engaging with the smart speaker willingly, meaning you say, Alexa, you wake it up, meaning I want to talk to you, and I want to talk to you, and I know you are a robot. As opposed to, you pick up the phone, you call a number, and you get a robot, you get an IVR. Usually when people pick up a phone, they have a problem, and they aim to speak to somebody, to a person, right? And the IVR comes up, and they feel like it's a buffer, or they have to put up with it. And so they are engaging with the IVR unwillingly. So usually we see behavior like sabotaging, like pressing 0. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you. Please get me a human being, right? So it's important to note that now that we have people who are engaging with these smart speakers willingly, finally we have the opportunity to create experiences where there's real collaboration, where you know that the person who's using the speaker is willing to cooperate, is willing to do what it takes to maintain the conversation. So it's not in their interest to trip up the Alexa skill, right? I mean, why did you invoke me if you want to abuse me? Unless you want to abuse me, right? If that was your purpose. But if you want to do something, or you want to learn something, or you want to use the skill earnestly, then you are going to cooperate with the skill. So those are important things to keep in mind. And probably the new generation of designers, they take that for granted, that of course you are going to cooperate. Okay, so the first two, so there are three things to aesthetics in terms of non-visual, right? So there is the sound, and there is the language, and there is the flow, the conversational, right? So from the sound and the language, right? If you think about a piece of music, right? Let's say a Chopin, beautiful piece of music, right? Or if you or sound that you love, the sound of baseball field, or the sound of skiing, right? The one thing, the first high-level observation is that there is something. There's a unit there. There's cohesion, right? Everything fits with each other, right? There's no dissonance. It's a whole, right? there is a whole to appreciate there, right? So cohesion is an important concept. So your skill should be cohesive. What does that mean? All right, so the language you use should not be varying. I'll give you an example. So let's say your Alexa skill does something very mundane, which allows you to open a trouble ticket, right, for a service, that you're using. So if the skill uses the word ticket at one place and then case in another place, right, then there's dissonance. Like, why are you using different words for the same thing, right? So it sort of violates the cohesion principle there. The sound of your skill, meaning, like, for example, if you use a skill, an Alexa skill or Google Action, and you have text-to-speech mixing with non-text-to-speech, right? I mean, you have to work really hard to make sure that there isn't dissonance between the two. If you can do something without text-to-speech, do without text-to-speech. If you want to do text-to-speech, try to do only text-to-speech. Or if you integrate sounds, make sure that those sounds fit with the voice that you have chosen. All right, go for cohesion. So, for example, if you do text-to-speech male and the audios are female, or vice versa, right? Where it just, I mean, the thing is, you don't want people to ask the question why. Like, why are you using different sounds, or why are you using different words, right? Because when you ask somebody when somebody thinks about a why, it's distracting them from following the conversation. It's also an effort, like you're wondering why. It requires thinking, right? You want to avoid them thinking outside of the experience. You don't want them to go meta on you. You want them to be in the experience. You want it to be immersive, right? And the less dissonance, the better. Volume, very simple thing as volume. Like if you have some prompts that are more, that are louder than other prompts, or your prompts are softer than the out-of-the-box Alexa skill volume, right? Then there is that, again, it sort of impinges on cohesion. So liveliness is another thing, right? So the piece of Chopin, or there's lively, or the baseball, right? There's something alive about them, right? Something that is just like that you feel is alive, right? So your skill should be alive too, right? So it cannot be just like robotic sounding, like, tell me your level of satisfaction with our pricing. Tell me your level of satisfaction with our cleanliness, right? Vary the language, make it not sound robotic, because robots are not alive, right? Even if they pretend to be, they're not alive. So you're trying to create liveliness through variability, vocabulary. Use just the right word. Avoid like the soft words like have and is, right? Those are, do something like give and put, right? Things that are again lively and precise, right? And be original. Don't create questions like why are they using this phraseology, but don't do things like welcome to the so and so skill. Everybody says welcome to the so and so skill. You can make an effort and do something original, like a piece of sound, and say hi there. What can I do for you? Blah, right? Do something where the person is going to feel that, hey, the person who did this was not just doing a job, right? Because most of the skills that I hear, either they are just like somebody's job, they were forced to do it, or they are doing minimal effort, they just copied somebody else. They didn't think through the experience. And again, that takes away from liveliness. And then the last thing is social intelligence, right? Meaning when I'm talking to somebody, if I'm not a social idiot, right? I'm not going to dominate the conversation if it's a back and forth, right? If it's a back and forth and we're talking, I'm going to talk. I'm going to give you a turn. You talk, I talk, right? So be brief. Cogency. Don't say things that either the other person doesn't understand, or you don't care, because you want to use your own vocabulary and you want to use your own phrasings. So you're not cogent, you're not precise, you're not clear, you're not limpid, right? And then patience. Patience is, if you are socially sophisticated, you are not going to cut people short. You are going to give them time to talk. If they make an error, you are going to be patient with them, and you are going to help them, in a way to get the conversation back on track. And so let me just go here. Again, the construct of aesthetic is useful because it introduces a whole set of words that I think are actionable, right? So we can talk about blemishes, right? What are the blemishes that we see in this, or we hear in this skill, right? Mispronunciation. So your skill could be really nice, but then you mispronounce some words, right? And then the user is going to note that and is going to have a bad reaction. And usually it just means that the people who built the skill or designed the skill didn't put in the effort or didn't care. They really didn't care, right? Who cares, right? That they mispronounced. So if the designer didn't care, why should the user care? It just creates bad feelings, right? Bad grammar, right? And then Alexa sounding like it's reading something as opposed to speaking, right? Like written prose. As I was saying before, varying volumes. Why is it now loud and not so loud as before and so forth? Robotic sequences, the one I gave you about how do you feel about X, how do you feel about Y. Long prompts, sudden stops. So these are, I call them blemishes, right? Blemishes in the experience, because they, when you hear them, you notice them. And it just reduces the aesthetic quotient of your Alexa skill or your Google action. Sudden stops, all of a sudden it stops. Like, what the hell happened, right? Anyway, so from these we can go to some practical tips. These are probably things that you are familiar with, but don't use different words, as I was saying, mixing TTS, consistency in volume. I don't think there's anything. Not cryptic, right? So there's this balance between concise and cryptic, right? You can be cryptic only with a power user, somebody who, let's say you build a skill that people use twice a day or 5 times a week, right? And they know what to say, right? So there, you can start initially when they start using it by using full prompts, and then you reduce the length of the prompt. And for somebody who is not familiar with the script, with the skill, it might sound cryptic, but for somebody who's using it, just one word, they know what you're asking for. And then the last thing is actionable help, right? So provide help that is actionable. Don't just describe. You can do this, and that, right? So you can say X, Y, and Z, right? Things that the users are going to act upon. And again, all this actionable help and so forth are, you can rely on them because the user is, again, cooperating. They want the conversation to be successful. And so when you give them help, they will listen. And if you give them actionable help, they will follow your recommendations and they will act accordingly. And hopefully they restore the conversations to its flow. Okay, so that's it. That's all I have. I think I must have time, hopefully, for any questions. Yeah. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Questions? Yeah.
That was interesting the way you described IVR as something you're trying to get past.
Yeah.
Versus the things you use. Why is it that, or what is something that we can learn if we make good speech tools that can be translated to IVR for better experiences to actually accomplish something?
Yeah. Well, I think the baseline barrier is the fact that when somebody calls, they want to talk to somebody, right? So, but for sure, we can definitely take a lot of learnings. I mean, there's a lot of learning that came from that world to this new world, right? The IVR world. People do build great experiences when somebody wants to engage with the IVR. So, for example, an example where you want to engage with the robot, with the IVR is, let's say you want to get test results and you don't want to talk to somebody, right? Or you're applying for a mortgage and there are 5 questions that can be asked, or you are trying to provide your credit card to fulfill a service, right? You want to talk to a robot because that's more secure than to a human being, right? So I think that baseline of, and maybe the smart speaker, the goodwill that the smart speaker is creating, where people view voice or automated voice not as a bad thing, but as a good thing through Alexa, and maybe hopefully that will seep back into the IVR. So when somebody calls in and they hear something that sounds like an Alexa, oh, they say, oh, this is like an Alexa. Oh, yeah, I'll talk to him or her, right? We'll see. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
Curious, you said don't mix TTS, text-to-speech, and audio. But I've seen some skills, or heard some skills rather, where,
Yeah.
I've heard some skills that do. I'm thinking like the Grand Tour mixed some of the TV personalities speaking to Alexa and back and forth. So
Yep.
What are your deeper thoughts on that and
Yep.
how that works for somebody?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's no rule that can be applied to anything, right? So let's not be dogmatic about anything. In the case of the Grand Tour, for example, right? The question there, would it have been better if what Alexa said was spoken by a voice talent, for instance, right? Or
In
not?
my experience, I thought it was more engaging because they were playing off of her, and it made them and her more of a complete personality type.
Yeah, I think there is. I think that there is a. Again, it depends, right, on the context there, right? So if Alexa is a character, right, and that character is a character that somebody wants to engage with, yeah, of course, use that, right? But most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's not Alexa. You're talking to the brand, right? In that case, there's it feels like introducing Alexa in there just doesn't fit, right? You should have. It feels like you could have done better to create an experience that was more flowing, right? That was not out of the box, right? But to your point, if it's a character, Alexa the character, it's herself, yeah, for sure. And Alexa, as opposed to Google Action, because she has a name and people have gotten to hear her voice and so forth through commercials and all that, is her own persona. So I think she has a role to play there. But most of the time, I would say if you're building it for a client, try to create a cohesive experience as opposed to just use the Alexa out of the box.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions? No? Oh. Yeah.
One more question kind of about IVR is,
Yeah.
I frequently hear things like, listen carefully or this might have changed.
Yeah, yeah.
All these stupid repetitive phrases, like,
Yeah.
is inevitably going to be part of badly made apps, or is it, what do you think is the future of not creating these bad experiences that so many companies have
Yeah.
absorbed in their environment?
Well, I mean, the good news is we're hearing less and less of that in the IVR world because those experiences now are designed by folks who know that you shouldn't be saying things like that, right? Before, IVR was deployed by engineers, right, or people who thought that you could design, and what they did is they just said, okay, what's out there? Okay, oh, this tree. Let me just copy this tree and add our own prompts, right? But I think now designing for voice is a practice, right? Is a function within organizations, and those designers, those are the people who hate this kind of stuff the most because it just messes up with the brand of their of their profession. I think we won't see, hopefully, right? We won't see unless some of those people will start building Alexa skills, right? Yep. Last question.
Sometimes those good principles, they come into conflict with compliance company regulations. For example, we need to read out in IVR some legal statement to the customers,
Yes, yes.
which might be quite negative.
Yeah.
Any strategies to kind of mitigate this conflict, basically to keep both grounds
Uh-huh.
compliant and nice to the customers?
Yeah, I guess my answer is that we are now able to do certain things that we couldn't do before. I think one can assume that everybody has more or less a smartphone, right? So if there's a compliance thing and it's a long piece of text and all that, just say, I've sent you a text. Send it to them as a text. That's one strategy, right? And you can build your skill so that when they click the text, the skill knows that they have read or have accepted the terms, right? So that's just a brainstorm about how, what you want to avoid is 2 minutes of legalese spoken because they won't listen to it. Plus having it as a text is it's not ephemeral. It stays within their right, so they can read it again later on. That's one way of doing it. I think you're next, right? So thank you very much, everyone.